Hello everyone and welcome to Clay Formations. I trust you all had a wonderful Halloween. I know I did. Today we're going to be working on something a little odd. The first thing we'll do is we'll take an ordinary snail shell. Find something for it to crawl over. Then we'll start working with what's inside. We'll cut a little bit of wire. And then we'll straighten it out. Whoa, careful there. I drilled a hole through the entire egg so that I could put the wire all the way through. Structural integrity through the whole sculpture is really important because the last thing you want to happen is you're sculpting, everything is good, and then all of a sudden something breaks loose. So what I did here is created a T-joint to where I could put it inside the notch in the egg, so no matter what happens, when it's inside the egg it won't break off and spin. And as usual, the baking soda and super glue mixture. That keeps everything nice and secure. And now let me introduce you to the Beast, a Frankensteinish creation, all of my own doing. I will be creating a video specifically for this rig, and I will give a little more detail on how I made it. It really allows me a lot more freedom of positioning. Now I left the tang just a little bit long because I want to make sure that I can position the snail on top of the wood to make it look like he's crawling over it. Now we'll bend the armature into the pose. Now we'll put its head on and adjust the length of his tail. And now we will commence with the aluminum foiling, bulking it out so we don't waste clay. And it's right about here where I begin to see a problem. I have made the thing too bloody big. See? Look at that right there. How's it going to fit in that little shell? Wait a minute. Hey, Purple Tentacle, do you think you could give me a hand with this?
Of course I can, you pathetic human. Of course it takes a tentacle to do the job of a human. Stand back.
Hey, alright, it worked. Thanks, Purple.
Of course it worked, you pathetic human. Now to take over the world. Ha ha ha.
Okay, while he takes over the world, why don't we cover our sculpture up in Sculpey Ultralight. And even at this time, I'm still keeping in mind that I don't want to make it too thick or too bulky. Filling in the neck area here. Now I'm filling in what I call the skirt. I really don't know what the scientific name is, but it's the part that sort of floats on top of the surface. And there we go. Pretty good so far. Before we bake, I'm going to check his position on the base. He seems to be a little too far back, so I'm going to drill a hole that's closer to the front of the base and see how that works. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay, let's take this guy and bake him. While that's baking, we'll cut up some clay and run it through the pasta maker. And after it's done baking and cooled down, we'll rub it down with some liquid Sculpey. And then we'll start adding the clay. While we're adding the clay, I'd like to add that I was applying the liquid Sculpey with one of those magic eraser sponges. I don't recommend using those because all it did was leave magic eraser crumbs all over the piece, and I had to pick them off with my fingers to make sure that none of them were left behind because they would burn in the oven. Now I'll start the basic shape of the head, and I'm going to have to add a lot more clay to that as the sculpture goes along. And the reason why? You guessed it, I made the armature too big again. but I wasn't going to bother Purple Tentacle anymore to make that smaller, so I'll just have to make the head a little bigger than I want to. And that's going to be okay, because instead of using cabochons like I originally thought, I want to do something different with the eyes on this one and make them round, and I'll show you that process in just a few minutes. Now we'll just add the flat part of the clay to the bottom of the snail. And even as I'm adding more clay on the head right now, I'm still going to have to add more. Don't you just love the process? I know, trust the process. Now we'll shape out where the eyes are going to go. And now to try something a little different, I'm using clear marbles, and what I'm going to do is paint half of the marble black and leave the other half clear, and hopefully that should give us some depth to the eye while it being round instead of flat like a cabochon. At least I hope that it works. Now that the painted halves are dry, we can take them off and see how it worked. No, not too bad. Now I'll take the other one off, clean it off, and there's half and half. Not too bad. And since I'm using the round marbles for the eyes, I'll have to build up the clay around the head a little more to accommodate so it's not too shallow. See here, I have plenty of room to dig out some eye sockets. And then we'll put the eyes in, and then we'll make sure that they're lined up correctly. Now we'll add the facial structure around the eyes. By the way, if I sound a little bit funny, it's because I'm just now getting over a cold or allergies or whatever they call it. Quite frankly, I can't tell the difference anymore because they're all the same to me. I feel just as crappy with a cold as I do with allergies, so there you go. Plus, I just so happen to live in a place where the air quality is the worst in the world. Okay, I'm done complaining now. So let's get back to sculpting. Right now I'm refining his eyes, and I see here that his face is a little bit too long, so I'll cut that off and start the jawline there. Now I'll add a little bit of clay for his nose. And then I'll start working on his mouth. Give him a little bit of a frowning, stern look. Now we'll go back to the nose. I don't want his nose to look anywhere near a human, so I'll make it a little more open and flat. Kind of like the way my nose feels right now. I know, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I thought I was done complaining. I guess I'm not. So we'll go ahead and refine and detail the mouth and the nose, and then we'll start adding some eyelids. This will just be kind of the first pass. I'm not sure exactly how detailed I want the eyelids to be. I don't know if I want them to be thick or if I want them to be thin. We'll just see how it turns out. But before we continue, let's do a size check on that shell. And again, it is too small. Well, I give up. Nothing a trip to Hobby Lobby won't fix. How about instead of a shell, let's make him his own little portable spaceship with his own little rocket booster coming out of his behind. But anyway, that's something we can work with. Anyway, we'll measure his width and then we'll cut a hole inside of the egg. Right here we'll draw some guidelines. And then we'll start cutting with the X-Acto knife. Now I have to tell you, I hate cutting with X-Acto knives. I'm going to show you a scar. See that scar right there? I got that scar from trying to cut a golf ball in half with one of these. It did not end well. So what I'm going to do is bring out the Dremel and cut it that way, because I do not want to cut another hole in my hand. Okay, let's go see how this fits. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. Now we'll give him a little side bubble, but we're going to have to cut it in half. How shall I do? Oh, there we go. Well, that was easy. Now I'll use some hot glue to tack it to the sides. Kind of reminds me of one of those little silver campers. Now I'm going to take some wood glue and sort of blend the seams in together so it looks like all one piece. Oh my gosh, look at that. I couldn't do that again if I tried. Such precision. Unfortunately, it won't go the same for the other side. What I'm going to do now is create a little fin that's going to go on the top of the back with a little rocket motor on the top. I think that'll look kind of cool. Yeah, that fin's a little bit too big. Let's make it a bit more narrow. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, I think that'll work. Now I'll turn the paper over and transfer the design to the wood. Unfortunately, now I have to use the X-Acto knife, but I must say, balsa wood's a lot softer than a plastic egg. Okay, that looks about right. Now I'll sand a curve into the fin so it fits on the spaceship. Now we'll cut the excess off the rocket nozzle so it's not so big. Okay, that looks about right. I'll figure that out in a minute. Now let's glue the fin on, attach the engine, and this spaceship is ready for speed. Now we'll create some portholes for the side of the ship. We'll start by painting black on the back of the cabochons. Now we'll flatten out a flat sheet of Sculpey and we'll make the circles that will be the metal that go around the porthole windows. Now we'll take a smaller diameter brass tube and we'll cut out the middle, which will give us a ring that will go around the window porthole. I'm sure there's an easier way to do this, but you know me, I like doing things the hard way most of the time. Now as carefully as I can, I'm going to form the clay around the cabochon, so it looks like a real porthole window, kind of like this. What I'm going to do now is I'll form the clay along the side of the ship so that when I glue it, the sides will be flush. Now we'll take these off to bake and we'll start painting his shell ship. Snalien space shell ship. Yeah, that's it. Don't try to say that 3 times too fast or you'll end up saying a dirty word, then you'll end up having to go to confession. I think the Snalien space shell ship needs a little bit of color, so let's add some red to the sides here, and then we'll go ahead and paint the engine red as well. And now we'll paint the portholes with some gold paint. I found this little gear thing to glue on the back to make it look like a real engine. Okay, so now I'm going to glue the portholes on this side saddle thing. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call it, a side saddle. Okay, so that means it's a Snalien space shell ship side saddle. So as you know, retro spaceships have lots of rivets. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make 1,000 rivets. I'll see you guys in an hour or so. Oh, that took forever. Now to take all the rivets off the pie pan and then attach them to the Snalien spaceship. I hope that's enough because I don't want to make any more. Well, if I ever wondered why it takes me so long to make these things, this is probably the reason why. It's funny how I always start a project with the idea and assumption that everything's going to go well and nothing will happen to make me go in a different direction like this one did. And it usually ends up taking me a lot longer and being a lot more complicated than I originally intended. And this one has definitely taken me down that path. And most of the time, the original idea I had is nothing like the finished piece. So now that we've got all the rivets glued on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint some panels as though the rivets are holding the panels together. And full disclosure here, I'm not painting the lines this fast. I'm going very, very slow. The footage is sped up so it makes me look like I'm painting fast, but I'm really not. If I didn't speed up the footage a little bit, this video would be 3.5 hours long. And only Martin Scorsese can get away with that. I can't. Okay, now that that's all done, we can get back to sculpting. I'll start by refining his eyes. I'm glad that I chose not to use the cabochons because the fully round marbles really give you the opportunity to achieve a lot more depth and realism in the eyes. Sometimes the cabochons will work really well, but it didn't in this case. I don't really like using solvents or alcohol on my sculptures because I find it takes away a lot of the texture. That's the reason why I use brushes a lot. I use this brush first to create some fine pores, and then I go to a larger texture tool and then an even bigger texture tool after that to create a blend from small pores to large pores. So I said to myself, hey, let's make a snail. How hard can a snail be? I mean, really, it's just a snail. It's a slimy little slug, right? Oh my God, have you ever looked at a snail's skin? I mean, it is intricate and mathematically precise, but yet random. I kind of found myself in awe of the designs and the structure of the snail skin, to the point where I don't think I'll ever be able to step on a snail for the rest of my life. Of course, unfortunately, we'll have to do something for snail control because they eat all the vegetables in our garden, so sorry snails, you are beautiful, but you'll have to find another place to eat. And by the way, you might notice that I'm only showing you one side of the snail. I already did the other side. It took a tremendous amount of time to do this, but the way I see it, if you're gonna do something, you might as well do it right. And I usually end up eating my words because things end up taking me 3 times as long as I intended. Now to break out the cosplay and make him some snail antenna. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's where their eyes are. So I rolled out the cosplay and wrapped them in wire. Remember when you were a kid and you used to poke their little antenna and it would retract back into their head? I always thought that was funny. Maybe it was mean, but it was funny. You know, what can you say? We were kids. I decided to go ahead and bake them first and then attach them to the head to make it a little bit easier to blend. Creating a little nub at the tip, that's where I'll paint the eyeball in a little bit. Now we'll push the antenna into the head. Now we'll wrap some clay around the base. Blend it in with the ball stylus. Add some texture with the brush, and that'll do it. And into the oven you go, you Snalien, you. And now, finally, after weeks of work, I can start painting him. This process here is pretty much straightforward. You just cover him in paint. And I did have to do about 3 coats, I think, to completely cover him. Painting his antenna. And here's one of the main reasons why I really like using glass eyes, because if you get a little bit of paint on them, all you have to do is scrape it right off. Now I'll paint his underside using a lighter shade of gray. Give him a little brush here and a little brush there. Woohoo, that paint's cold. And now to carefully dry brush the outside to bring all of the texture and details out. Always remember you only need a small amount of paint on your brush to do the dry brushing. Now we'll add those eye dots to the tip of the antenna. And now for the optimal slimy snail look, we will add some satin gloss to the entire surface. And now for the bake. What in the world are you doing now? You do know we have a deadline and we're about a week past our schedule, right? Well, I guess a Snalien base needs mushrooms and moss as well. Well, let's attach that spaceship to the back of the Snalien and let's do light speed through the garden. Well, it looks like the Snalien went back to his home planet. Good thing we've got this video to show that there's evidence of snails on other planets. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching my video. I really appreciate it. And if you think I deserve it, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, make sure you subscribe. And as always, a big thank you to my subscribers. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support. Take care, and we'll see you next time.